Can you describe an early experience you had in a public library?
Oh gosh, yeah. So I grew up in Gastonia, North Carolina, and the public library there was incredible. And I can remember in my family, you got your library card when you turned 6. And it was a piece of like manila envelope colored cardstock with a little metal strip in it. And I can remember holding that library card and thinking, no matter what, if it's raining outside and I can't play in the woods or I can't play basketball, I can check out library books. I'll never be bored. And so I remember just going to the library and feeling an incredible sense of freedom to explore. I remember going to early programming at the library with story time with my mom would take me and my younger brother. But when I think of the library as a kid, I think of just the freedom of being able to walk around and pull things off the shelf that appealed to me. I mean, that's how I discovered my love for nonfiction, was stumbling upon biographies of athletes and just realizing how much I liked reading about other people's lives. And so the Gaston County Library was foundational to me as a reader, if not a writer, but certainly as a reader.
What are you currently reading?
What am I currently reading? Gosh, I'm reading so many things at once. I'm reading Brendan Slocum's first novel, his debut novel, The Violin Conspiracy. I'm almost done with that. I've recently begun reading Jane Ann Phillips' new novel that won the Pulitzer. It's called Night Watch. And I'm preparing for my class this fall at UNC-Asheville. I'm teaching all North Carolina writers and musicians, songwriters and fiction writers, and so I'm reading the things I'm teaching in that. Diane Oliver's story collection, Neighbors, Jill McCorkle's story collection, Old Crimes, and just kind of reading what comes across my desk for work and what I get to choose on my own.
What is your research process for writing a new book?
My research process for writing a new book is to do as much research as possible to not have to write, because research is way more fun than actually writing. Because what's great about research is somebody else has already done the work, and I just get to go out and find it and learn, and I love learning. But my research process is really just trying to decide if the idea that I've got is something that I can spend 3 to 4 years immersed in. Is there enough unknown? Is there enough curiosity on my part to really delve into this subject as much as possible? And so my process at the very beginning is just really kind of introspective. Do I want to do this? Do I want to commit? Do I want to put my family through this? Do I want to suspend certain parts of my life long enough to explore this? And then moving from there, I mean, it's no different than probably any other writers. A lot of reading, a lot of listening, a lot of traveling. If I'm writing about a place where I don't live, you know, I live on the coast of North Carolina, but I'm writing about another part of North Carolina. So it's a whole thing, but it's never as streamlined. You know, I just finished my 5th novel, and you'd think it would be streamlined and focused by now, and it's not.
Tell us about where you sit when you write.
Oh gosh, lots of different places. You know, I'm a working writer, which means that at this point in my career, writing is something that I do in my free time when I'm not doing all of the things that writing has allowed me to do. So I host a podcast for our state magazine in North Carolina. I teach, I travel and do wonderful events like this at the Richland Library. So when I'm not doing those things, I write. So I write in hotel rooms, I write in airports, we're doing an addition on our home in Wilmington, and so recently I've been sitting on the front porch with a huge box fan blowing on me to write. It's 1,000 degrees and I got a hot laptop on my knees and I'm still out there pounding away trying to meet deadlines. And so I've just learned that I don't need comfort. I don't need like a magic space or a magic moment to write. I can really turn it on and turn it off depending on where I am and what the deadline's calling for and what the unfolding day kind of looks like.
Do you think that reading literature with characters that are different than the reader build empathy and maybe even help create a stronger community in that way?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think that no matter who we are, our core emotions are the same. Grief feels like grief no matter who you are. Jealousy, anger, disappointment, betrayal, all those things feel the same. But the things that cause me grief as a middle-class white guy from North Carolina are not the same things that cause people grief from different communities in different parts of the state or country or world. And so I think what reading does for us, and what writing does for me when I'm writing characters who are outside of my experience, I understand that the emotion is the same. It's the causality of the emotion, and understanding the causality of the emotion, whether it be race prejudice, gender discrimination, things that I don't encounter. But if I can understand the causality of the emotion, I understand something more about my place in this country's history, and the history of my state. So I think the emotions are the same, but we don't arrive at them in the same ways and for the same reasons. And I think what reading does is it allows us to understand those different reasons and how they reach the same conclusions. But it's the reasons that matter. It's the reasons of why people feel the way they do that really matter.
Who's a non-literary artist that you find inspiration from?
There's so many. There's so many. I mean, I could go to singer-songwriters. I could go to visual artists. You know, one of my favorite visual artists over the past several years is Romari Bearden. He's a black collage artist from Charlotte, grew up in Charlotte. His work, especially his more, his Pittsburgh series of works, kind of showing the combination of the rural experience marrying the industrial experience and the Rust Belt. I just find that endlessly fascinating. So looking at his work, I can just feel the narrative urgency of the story leading to that moment. But there are so many singer-songwriters. In North Carolina, we're so lucky. There's a musician who I'm really loving recently named David Childers, who's a singer-songwriter from Gaston County, where I'm from. To give a shout out to a South Carolina band, Susto is one of my favorite bands, and they have a new live album out today, and shout out to them. But those are the kinds of things that I can put on when I'm driving, that kind of music, and I can put that on, and it just kind of makes me feel better. It makes me feel deeper. It makes me feel more literary.
What is it about the South?
Gosh, what is it not about the South? I think that Southerners get that question a lot, as I'm sure you do, Lee. But it's a question we can also ask of the French or the Japanese. Like, why do you love the South so much? Why are you so interested in the South? Why aren't any of us so interested in the South? I think a lot of it is almost inherent to the American experience, which we've now kind of exported as kind of a global experience. America's foundation myth is a global experience. But I think a lot of it is because going back to the earliest foundings of white settlements on this continent, the South is where they sent you if you acted out. If you weren't religious enough, if you had, progressive ideas about women or Native Americans, they sent you out of Massachusetts down into Rhode Island or down into the Virginia territories. And so the South was always where we kind of sent our misfits, right? The people who didn't go along to get along, who had these kind of dangerous ideas. And it was always seen as kind of a rural space with the Appalachian Mountains. You have the ocean on one side and the Appalachian Mountains on the other. And it kind of pins you in and contains you and kind of holds you in. And so the South was this great undiscovered country, especially kind of that middle South, the Carolinas, Georgia, up into Virginia, between Spanish settlement in the deeper South in the Florida and Louisiana area, and then of course the Puritan settlements in New England. That middle South was kind of this great unknown place where who knows what happens there. And I think in many ways we're still asking ourselves that question. What happens here? What has happened here? And I don't think we've yet scratched the surface of a lot of the causality of the ways in which the United States operates politically, economically, is based on the South in many ways.
What's a nostalgic food item from your childhood?
One of the most nostalgic food items from my childhood is something that I grew up eating. I don't know if it's got a name. If it does, I've forgotten it. But it's pinto beans. homemade pinto beans with cornbread crumbled over them, a big dollop of coleslaw, mayonnaise coleslaw, and sprinkled with diced onions. I don't know why. That is just something, that and liver mush with a side of like fried liver mush. That would be a typical Sunday after church meal in the Cash household.
Your wife is a photographer. What's it like in a household with two creative professionals?
There's a lot of financial panic, but joking aside, it is a restless household in many ways, and I don't mean that in the negative way it might seem. You know, my wife and I, she just finished a graduate program, so she's kind of coming out of the hibernation that higher ed forces you to be in, apart from the world. She's coming out of that now. But she and I are always contemplating projects and opportunities and ways to work together and ways to pursue different visions of what she wants to do for a project or what I want to do for a novel. And our network is pretty broad with other writers and musicians and photographers, and so we're always involved in various projects apart from our household. And so we spend a lot of time attending to the organizational structures of that kind of lifestyle. But we spend just as much time really delving into our sense of shared aesthetics about her visuals, or my visual on the page is the wrong word, but my crafting my ideas visually on the page. We talk a lot about that stuff. We talk a lot about what we're reading, about what we're seeing, about what we're looking at or what we're listening to. And it's really, I mean, our house kind of has like a salon type feel to it, where we're not snooty academics, but that's just what our lives are. You know, if you go to a farm, people who live in the farmhouse talk about farming, and we talk about art and photography and storytelling and writing, and our girls do too. That's kind of what they've been raised in.
If you weren't a writer or a teacher, what do you think you'd be doing?
Gosh, I remember when I was applying to graduate school, I did a master's degree at UNC Greensboro. And I was living in Asheville, and I was adjuncting at the university in Asheville, UNC-Asheville. And I was working some odd jobs, trying to make ends meet. And I'd applied to some graduate programs for creative writing, and I hadn't gotten accepted anywhere. And I grew up with a dad who was a handyman of sorts. He was always fixing things or building decks, and so we grew up doing that. And I felt this divergence in my life where I'd wanted to be a writer, but I didn't really have any publications, and I couldn't get into a graduate program. And I thought, well, I've always enjoyed working with my hands. I guess I'm just going to go to the community college and take some carpentry classes. But I didn't have the money, despite the number of jobs I was working, for tuition at the community college. So I called my dad and said, hey, would you float me the money to enroll in some carpentry classes? And he said no. He said, no, you need to keep applying to school because that's what you want to do. And I did, and I ended up going to graduate school for creative writing. But I still think that, I've done a lot of home renovation at houses I've lived in or houses I've flipped with my brother. And I think if I weren't doing this, I probably would have ended up doing something like that, like contracting or something like that.
All right, so now we'll do this or that.
Okay.
Early morning or late at night?
Early morning.
Outside or inside?
Outside.
Mountains or beach?
Mountains.
Football or basketball?
Basketball.
Highland Gaelic Ale or Highland Oatmeal Porter?
Oatmeal porter.
Boots or sneakers?
Boots.
Mustard base or pepper vinegar or ketchup base?
I feel like a traitor saying this because I'm from the western part of the state, but pepper base, that vinegar. That's the sweet stuff now that I'm down on the coast.
That's it.
All right. Thank you.